An 11-year-old girl stood in a crowded room and said she saw a witch. The adults didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss her. They leaned closer. Within a few months, 19 people were dead. They weren't strangers. They were neighbours. People who borrowed tools from each other, who shared fences and sat shoulder to shoulder in church. And somehow, in a village small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, suspicion spread faster than doubt. It began inside the home of Reverend Samuel Parris. His 9-year-old daughter Betty started screaming in the night. She twisted on the floor, as if something unseen had pressed its weight against her ribs. Soon her cousin Abigail Williams began doing the same. The doctor found no illness, no wound, no explanation he could name. In a community that believed the devil walked among them, the absence of an answer became its own kind of answer. Someone whispered the word witchcraft. The room changed. Adults demanded to know who was hurting them. If something invisible was attacking their children, it had to have a face. Abigail hesitated. Then she pointed. The first names belonged to women already living on the edge of respectability. Tituba, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne. Poor, isolated, easy to distrust. When they were arrested, the village felt a flicker of relief. The danger had somewhere to live now. But fear rarely stays satisfied. In the meeting house, the girls began collapsing again. They screamed that spirits clawed at them. They claimed to see shapes behind people's shoulders. When the accused tried to speak, the girls cried out as if struck. One afternoon during testimony, a farmer sitting near the front shifted uncomfortably as Abigail gasped and clutched her chest. She pointed across the room and said she saw a spectre standing beside him. The man's face drained of colour. He shook his head, slowly at first, then faster. No one had accused him directly, but every eye in the room turned toward him. He lowered his gaze. That is how power moved in Salem, not in grand speeches, but in rooms full of people afraid to be the next name spoken. Once the court treated the accusations as real, doubt began to look reckless. Bridget Bishop was the first to be sentenced to death. She was outspoken, wore brighter colours than most, and had long unsettled her neighbours. In another season, that might have made her eccentric. In that summer, it made her suspicious. When she died, the atmosphere hardened. This was no longer a frightening rumour, it was law. The trials found their rhythm, hearings, testimony, girls collapsing, neighbours whispering. Then Rebecca Nurse's name was spoken. Rebecca was 71. She had raised children in the village. She prayed in the same church as the judges. She was the kind of person people trusted without thinking. When her accusation was announced, there was a pause in the room, a long one. Rebecca stood quietly while the girls writhed on the floor. One of them screamed that Rebecca's spirit was pressing on her throat. Another said she felt pins in her skin. For a moment, the jurors leaned toward acquittal. Outside the courthouse, though, the pressure built. If the girls were lying, then the panic itself was built on nothing. If the court admitted error, every arrest before would be questioned. The verdict changed. Rebecca Nurse was condemned. After that, safety felt imaginary. And this is where Salem became something more than a courtroom drama. People began calculating. If someone mentioned your name, denying the charge could make you appear stubborn, maybe even defiant. Confessing, however, opened another path. Confession allowed you to explain yourself. It allowed you to shift blame. It allowed you to survive. A woman accused of witchcraft might confess and then quietly add, "I saw Sarah with the devil too." A man under suspicion might name 2 neighbours, before anyone named him again. Accusation became insurance. In Salem, survival began to look like pointing first. Families who once shared meals now avoided each other in the street. A glance held too long felt dangerous. A disagreement over land could be reimagined as revenge. Even silence started to look suspicious. Fear rearranged morality in subtle ways. Protecting yourself meant risking someone else. Staying alive meant participating in the machinery. Through the summer, 19 people were executed. Giles Corey refused to enter a plea and was pressed under heavy stones until he died. Others died in prison waiting for judgment. With each death, the town convinced itself the threat had been real. To question the process meant confronting the possibility that innocent people had already paid the price, and that is a confrontation most communities resist. Eventually, the accusations reached beyond the vulnerable. Influential families were named. Ministers outside Salem criticized the reliance on visions as evidence. The governor dissolved the court. The panic did not end with revelation. It ended because the structure holding it up began to crack. Years later, Judge Samuel Sewell stood before his congregation and publicly admitted his error. He asked for forgiveness. But forgiveness does not refill empty chairs. Imagine walking through Salem after the trials ended. A house on the edge of the village sits quiet, its door hanging slightly uneven. The field beside it grows wild because no one is there to tend it. In church, a familiar bench remains empty week after week. People glance at it and then quickly look away. No one speaks the names out loud anymore. Abigail Williams disappeared from the historical record not long after the hysteria faded. There is no confession, no explanation, only absence. Was it truly a lie? There is no proof she believed she was inventing everything. She may have been frightened. She may have felt trapped by expectations she helped create. She may have discovered, too late, that attention can grow heavier than silence. When a child realizes adults are listening with urgency, something shifts. When judges treat those words as fact, the shift becomes permanent. And when a community discovers that certainty feels safer than uncertainty, it clings to certainty even when it costs something irreparable. Salem was not filled with villains, it was filled with ordinary people trying to protect themselves from something they did not understand. The lie, if it was a lie, did not kill 19 people alone. Belief carried it forward. Fear amplified it. Silence allowed it to continue. That is how a village turned anxiety into accusation into law, and law into death. One child spoke. A town listened. 19 people never came home. They believed they were protecting their families. They believed they were doing what was necessary. Fear felt responsible. Certainty felt safe. And once enough people agreed, doubt became dangerous. That's the part that never really disappears.
Same old humans. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, you're probably not alone. If you enjoy stories that prove people have always been like this, subscribe for more. Same old humans.